And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest or guests bring with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guests are Bellini and Gore Abrams. You have seen them previously in the Hell House LLC films, but they're adding writer and director to their resumes with their new short film, Locations. Welcome to the show. We are so stoked to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're very stoked to be here.
You've also seen Gore in The Substance, randomly. That's really cool. Just doing a lot of cool things over here with these two guys.
Oh yeah, you gotta plug The Substance. That movie was so good. And he doesn't come out of nowhere? Good. I knew he was going to be in there, obviously, but Gore, you come out of nowhere. I remember watching it, and I heard the neighbor starts banging, and he's like, "Lady, shut up!" And I'm like, "Oh, that's Gore. I know it. I know that scream."
What I think is so random about my character in there is that they even bothered to give him a name, because there's so many archetypes of men that are terrible in that movie and that sort of represent, I think, different sort of invasive beings. But and maybe I'm wrong. I've only seen the film once, but it seems like a few of them are not. There's a whole thing about my name immediately when I come on there, and so I thought that was, I don't know. You don't really need to know that guy's name, but
we do.
But it's great.
Important. It's important. Well, okay, so substance aside, you guys have co-written and co-directed a short film called Locations. Can you tell us a little bit about it? About Locations?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a short. It's really a proof of concept film for a feature that we've written and rewritten and written again over the years, and yeah, I mean, it's something that we very much intend to make sooner rather than later. But we wanted to try and make this proof of concept film for a few reasons. First of all, just to kind of prove to ourselves that we could do it, and that this idea has merit and makes sense, and that we could put the sort of aesthetics that we have in mind to work, and so that we could also work with actors with this material, so that we could work with Nicolas Fuchs, who's a fantastic cinematographer who we've been speaking with for a long time, and we wanted to just sort of work with him. The short film, is essentially just it's not in the movie per se, in the feature film script, but it takes elements from it. There's a few lines from there, but we wanted to write something that was sort of encompassing of the general tone and vibe of the movie and what it's about, and just sort of test our wares with it and see, what we could do with it.
The biggest thing also was the lead character that Gore plays. We needed to make sure he translated to screen because we're kind of playing this line of you hate this guy, but you can't help but root for this guy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is, there's a lot of a fish out of water kind of horror story to this, where he's an American in a foreign land, and he, obviously is the bad guy, he keeps saying the wrong things, he keeps doing the wrong things, but when you're an American watching this, you're like, well, that would be me. I would probably make all those shortfalls. And it's funny because, like Gore said, we wrote a whole feature script, and when Americans read it, they're like, oh, this is a horror movie. And then when the French read it, they're like, this is hilarious. And we get way more comedy from that aspect of it. And I think that's kind of, we're kind of gearing for that a little bit, because if you read the script, the character just continues to just fall on himself again and again and again. And it's hard to really point to anything at fault except for him. So yeah, in the short, we wanted to make sure that the character would translate. And did you guys watch because we have a private link? Right. So people have watched that privately, and they'll tell us, they're like, I really kind of hated this guy, but at the end I was like, oh man, he's in over his head. I hope he gets out alive, and we're like, okay, so it translates.
Yeah, the characters is definitely one of those I've definitely seen those kind of American type people in a foreign land, but at the same time, it's I kind of would be that same person, so it definitely translated for me.
Well, and also we're in an era, I think, where we're people are finally into more complicated, maybe not the most admirable character too. You know what I mean? I feel like we're in an era where audiences are more welcoming to like a not so likable protagonist, but cheering for them. And I love that. Like, I think y'all lean into that with this for sure. And I think it's nice to get a more like, you know, we like more nuanced, weird, complex characters that are like kind of douchebags, like kind of not great. Not this character is douchebag, but like not great. But you still are like,
kind of is.
Yeah, it's like. Shit, I do actually kind of like him though, and it's a hard line to walk though, and I think that's really cool that you guys are able to accomplish that because again, it's not that easy.
No, it was difficult.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is difficult, and that has been like a lot of people who have read the script have been like, can you just try and make him like. Can we try and root for him a little more? Could we try and make him a little more likable? And I've definitely been very fervent about like, no, we gotta make him. Fuck him. Like,
we did. I think
that's what makes him human too. And like, I don't know. I've definitely had this experience of being a foreigner, very much like not that France is like such a crazy, you know. Different place, you know. It still like has much of the same Western values that like America has, but it is truly a different place. And I've had my own experiences of feeling like an outsider here. But then what's always interesting is seeing like when Danny first came, I remember he was Arnold. Like he was behaving exactly like he was getting frustrated about how things don't operate the way that he would like them to operate. My sister just visited. She was the exact same way. I was just at Danny's wedding and I saw his.
My whole family was Arnold. Yeah,
yeah, but like, and I just see like when people are thrown out of their comfort zone, and then they just but they're still there's still the will to survive and to be understood, and the need to be understood and to be empathized with. And so I don't know. I mean, that's why I feel like we're trying to like present this character who is extremely flawed and not in touch with his own history as a person. There's some substance abuse issues. There's a myriad of difficulties in his life, but still present him as a person that you want to at least like make it through the day.
Yeah.
Well, when you said,
oh, sorry.
Oh. I was gonna
change. I was gonna ask a question, so please, Danny, you go.
Oh, well, I was gonna say when you mentioned going outside the comfort zones, it kind of gets back to when we started writing this, because Gore and I started writing this right when the pandemic was getting into full effect.
Okay.
And he and I were in the same neighborhood, but stuck in our houses.
Right.
We had like one of those hangouts where like we had to stay outside in the cold.
Oh, like the socially distanced outside gathering where like you're hanging out but you can't touch each other or be that close to each other.
But I was visiting. I wasn't even living there.
That's right. Yeah, you just visited back. Well, because you moved. So he moved to France.
Yes.
And this idea came to him, and he had a very loose draft full of his what would you say your fears and your anxieties all in this draft, and he brought it to me, and I was like, bro, this is a horror film. Like let's make this a horror film.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's where we started working on. We started, I mean, we would, from across oceans, we would talk like once a week and just work on this story. Yeah, every Friday. Well, Friday afternoon for me. I had summer Fridays at work. Don't tell my job that I did. I only did this on summer Fridays. And we just kept working at it again and again. And I remember he would call me up and he'd be like, "Oh, this thing just happened to me. We got to put it in the script." and I'd be like, "Oh, all right, let's do it. Let's fit it in."
Mining your experience as an expat, trying to navigate living in France.
Totally.
But it comes from a real place because again, there's the fatherhood aspect, and Gore just had a child. He's got another one on the way, and
oh my god, congratulations!
Thank you very much. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Wait, how old's your first?
Well,
your first?
My daughter is she's almost 6 actually. So she was 2, I guess, when the pandemic was starting.
Time is fake.
Yes, it is. And I think I was going through a lot of those thoughts about like what do we pass down? Mm-hmm. You know, even the title locations. Like Arnold is a location scout, but it's also about like the locations of where we store trauma and like how those, you know, how that kind of comes to be and what we pass down generationally. And I had some great fears about like just, you know, whatever like shitty thing I maybe have or inside of me, like passing that down. And like, you know, like when we first found out we were going to have a kid, like I went back to therapy just because I was like, I need to exercise some of these things just so that I know how to face them better.
Not a lot of guys do that, and it's very nice to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was necessary.
Awesome. It's great though.
I didn't see it as a choice.
He didn't volunteer.
Well, I did. I mean, I did do it, but and continue to when I need to when it's But where was I going with that? So yeah, just Arnold is not that I'm evolved, but he's nowhere. He's not doing that. He's not putting that work in. So
he's not. He's like a typical kind of like unfortunate stereotypical male character who's like, I don't need to interrogate anything going on in my past or in my mind at all. I'm fine. I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna raw dog it and just like pretend that everything is fine.
Yeah,
raw dogging parenthood.
Yeah,
raw dogging parenthood.
It's a good episode title.
But honestly, yes. But so Gore, in your I think it was your director's statement, you said that when you arrived in France, you had like a nightmare, you had insomnia, and then everyone started having nightmares. Is that like, I wanted to hear more about that story because that was a really fascinating thing to me that like I don't know why, like what a weird kind of event happening with everyone having a nightmare when you arrived. Or can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, it was
that's nuts.
When I first visited, actually, it was before I had ever moved here. Because I've been with my wife Charlotte for, I don't know, we've been together like 11, 12 years, and this was a long time ago. It was when I first visited, and I knew zilch as far as French is concerned, and even less as far as the culture in Brittany, which some would argue they're not French, they're Bretons. That's what they would say. They even have their own language. It's not super common, but it's kind of like a very Celtic sort of version of French. And I went there. I stayed with her family. They're lovely. I've gotten to know them, and they're wonderful. But there was this great divide. It felt very cold. I didn't really know how to sort of penetrate the conversation in any way. I wasn't used to these 3-hour dinners. Or these just long sessions at the table. I mean, it's like lunch for a few hours, then you like take a nap, and then, you have some coffee, and then you have the apero where you have the drink around 5, 6 o'clock, and then that bleeds into dinner, and then dinner can go till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I remember the first night that I was there, I slept well. I remember sleeping in the basement room. I remember there was daddy long leg spiders all around, which apparently my wife told me that night was evidence of a sane house. I've never heard that before. I don't know if it's true. And I slept well. And then the next morning I got up. I was talking to everybody. Everybody kind of looked a little rough, and no one had slept. And I was like, okay. And I heard her mom. I made out that her mom was kind of saying that she had some nightmares. I was like, okay, whatever. The next night,
it's you.
The next night, the same thing happened again. And me being an arrogant American who also doesn't understand what the hell is going on, I believed that it was all about me. And so this went on for like 2-3 nights. Nobody was sleeping well. I'm sure it was, I don't know if it was the moon was not in alignment. I'm not sure, what, or in perfect alignment. But I just became convinced that this was, that something was going on, and that I was probably bringing some negative energy, that maybe there were some issues that I had not dealt with that were sort of festering out. I don't know. I went on, when you don't speak the language and you're and you're just sitting there at dinner for 3 hours, like your mind goes to strange places, You're just sitting and drinking.
Dinner sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Yeah. And if you're me, you're drinking red wine and it.
You just, but what else do? You just drink your way through it, and then you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, like any artist, you take that experience and you turn it into a feature screenplay.
Absolutely.
Horror film.
Yeah.
Wait, that's incredible. Wow, I'm so glad. I was going to say, if you hadn't, I would have been mad if you hadn't turned that into that entire experience into a screenplay, because that's crazy.
Yeah.
And are you now basically fluent in French, or at least enough to get by? Okay.
I can get by. I can get by.
Hell yeah. All right, cool.
He like blacks out and speaks French fluently, and then comes to, and he's like, "What happened?" I've seen it.
It's in there somewhere. It's located somewhere. I don't know. It's weird.
Your French alter ego.
Totally, yeah. Gore. It's weird. Danny's been taking French too, so he should.
It's so difficult. I can't. I took 2 courses here in New York. I'm on Duolingo, of course. I'm also on Babbel. And then I go to France, and all I say is merci or bonjour, and then that's it. Or I could say je suis désolé now because I'm always apologizing. I'm doing something wrong all the time in France.
Pardon.
Yeah, when I went to Japan, that was what I learned how to say. I said, how do you say sorry? I'm a dumb American in Japanese. Like, that's like what I need to learn how to say. But
and
so then how did... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm interrupting you. I'm so sorry.
Well, you got to go now.
Okay, now I got to go. Jesus. But I was just going to ask about your guys' relationship to horror and move back to, like, how y'all got introduced to the genre and how old you were and all of that stuff. And if that was the mainstay in your childhoods.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can go.
Yeah.
Horror has always been a big part. My mom is actually a huge Stephen King fan.
Okay.
Cool.
So ever since I was a kid, there's been a library of Stephen King fiction in my living room, and she would introduce me little by little. I actually asked her this morning because I couldn't remember. I was like, "What's the first horror movie you think I ever saw?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't know." And she said it might have been Jaws because she absolutely loves Jaws. She watches it anytime it's on TV. I don't know. I have these because gearing up for this podcast, I have these memories of these films that would stick with me, that would scar me, quote unquote. But I never sat down and watched a full horror movie as a child. I don't think until I got a little bit older. And as a kid, I used to be very much scared of growing up, of time, of not being at home anymore. I had like this weird understanding of growing up and being an adult and not being a kid anymore, and it bothered me. And I wonder
how existential.
I know I was an existential little child, and then I
wasn't going that deep.
When I found horror, when I found horror movies, they made light of death. I mean, sure, it's not really light. People are dying in agony half the time, but I think it kind of settled that anxiety in me, and I think I've just been kind of chasing that. You know, the idea of a movie, of a story is the end. You know. The 2 hours are up, the movie's over, you go home. And that to me was nice. It was nice to be like, oh, I'm so scared, but it's over now and I can go home now.
Yeah.
So I think I just continually kind of chase that. I mean, I've done a lot of dumb things as a kid with like Ouija boards and stuff. And my mom would ask me then, even though she's a horror fan, she's like, why the hell are you doing this? She's very religious. So she'd be like, why are you doing this with Ouija boards?
Interesting. She's really religious and she's really into horror. Okay,
It's paradoxical.
Is she Catholic?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Catholic and horror go hand in hand.
Oh, yeah. That's why I was like, Catholic?
But I would tell her, I'm like, why am I playing Ouija boards? Because it makes life a little more exciting. It feels like the movies. And where at one point I was chasing the fantastical just because it pulled me away from death. Now I'm chasing the fantastical because it pulls me away from the banality, I guess, of life. But I don't know. It's complicated. Maybe I'm just set in now. Maybe I just love horror now. I can't leave. But those were all my thoughts. Yeah.
Cool.
I love playing that you played Ouija board as a kid. When I was a kid, I tried to summon a demon.
Sure.
My dad had a bunch of like arcane books, and I remember it was the Keys of Solomon, and I remember me and my friend were trying to like recreate the rituals. Yeah. Yeah.
Man.
It was the Keys of Solomon. I did not know that it was the Keys of Solomon, you psychopath.
Yeah.
I did not know.
Yeah, that's legit.
Terry and I have been best friends for a very long time at this point, and sometimes he tells me things that still shock me. And that's one of them.
It's a good friendship.
Yeah.
That is good.
Yeah.
Terry,
that's intense, man.
Anyway.
Yeah, a candle flickered while we were doing it once, and that was
it, though?
That was it. That was creepy, though. We're like,
man.
okay, maybe we're done.
Keys of Solomon. No, I had all kinds of. I had growls. I had bushes. I had trunks, clothes on. I have a whole story with this girl I was seeing at the time, and we got chased out of a cemetery, and I went to go put the Ouija board into my trunk, and the trunk closed shut halfway with the Ouija board in it. And that Ouija board was actually owned by a recently deceased psychic. So
what?
I had I told my now wife this story, and her sister thought I was evil for like the first couple months we were dating. And I'm like, it's just an anecdote. It's okay. It's not a real story.
Wait, what did you get chased out of a cemetery by? A person or a ghost?
Well, you know the rules of Ouija board? How you're not supposed to ask for anyone? I asked for anyone. And
so,
I got like this really big like growl from the back of the cemetery. It sounded almost like a giant like iron door closing. It was like, but it was like it had a feel of a growl. And the girl I was with, she said she heard a girl scream and laughter. I didn't hear those things, either of those things. But I was like, okay, let's pack it up. We're sitting on a gravestone, by the way, and we pack it up, and we smoked weed, so we desecrated the shit out of it. So we pack it up, and we're leaving, and we go out the main entrance. And I remember telling her, I was like, damn, we could have saw something really cool. But no, we had to leave because you got scared. And the second I said that growl was like right behind me. It was like, and I swear, all the bushes, everything was just like, everything picked up in intensity. And we booked it. We ran to my car. The trunk closed halfway on the board game. She looked at me. She goes, that thing's going to take your head off one day. And then I didn't touch it for a while. My roommate got so scared he threw it away. And then I didn't do anything else for a long time until I told my other friend this, and he didn't believe me, and he made me go back to a different cemetery with a different Ouija board.
No!
And we had a different experience. But that was in Florida. I don't get anything like that in New York. New York's very, very busy. I don't get any ghostly things in New York. It's just a Florida.
Florida. That's where the veil is thinner in Florida. That's why it's such a weird.
Yes, the veil is thinner.
It makes sense.
We're below sea level.
So Gore, did you have any experiences like this?
No, really. My younger brother and I, though, we always talk about it. We had this stone, like this big stone that had like some kind of animal footprint on it. Like I remember it was like a chicken or something, like very thin. And we would take it out. We lived in the Pacific Northwest, but like in the desert, in the Eastern Washington. And and like our backyard was like just this vast desert with sagebrush and tumbleweeds and the whole. And we would run out there and we would throw it, and it was like this pretty large stone, and it kept coming back, like to our, like the edge of our backyard, and it would have like more animal footprints every time. I don't know if this has been like fabricated in our minds, and we've talked about it so much over the years that it's sort of become this lore between the two of us, but it just kept coming back. And I remember, like, we were dramatic kids. I remember one night it was like storming, and it was like the 7th time it had come back, and we were like crying. Both of us were crying, and we were running out into the desert screaming, and we were like, we denounce you. We denounce you. But that's the only thing. I mean, I think we were just bored, probably. I don't know.
Honestly, though, that's an incredible story.
That's amazing.
And I need at least a short film about that experience. Because I denounce you in the rain is like very cinematic.
I don't know what we were denouncing, but I remember we were both fully crying. 2 young boys just like full screaming faces. And we still talk about that. Yeah, that, and my older sister Dawn told me when we were young that all adults turn into animals at night, and they like go outside and they like run around, they party and eat and do whatever the fuck they do, and it fucked me up for like years, for like too many years, to like where I was too old. I was like, wait a minute, obviously not.
I haven't turned into an animal yet.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
But like, I don't know that I truly believed it, but it was just sort of like, it was always there in my mind. Like when I went to sleep, I was like, fuck, dude, now they're going to go turn into animals. It's like, I hope it's all right. Like, I hope
it's all right.
Yeah. I mean, I hope they have fun, but I also hope I'm alive tomorrow.
Wow.
So the footprints were your family's footprints in the
Yeah.
stone.
I never connected those.
Mm-hmm. Who are you really denouncing?
Who needs therapy?
Who needs therapy when you have podcast recordings?
Yeah.
Wow.
Animal footprints on stones aside, Gore, like, how did you get into horror? Or was it the footprint rock?
No. I think I got into horror because of R.L. Stein.
Okay, yeah.
100%.
Hell yeah.
I'm a kid from the 90s. It got me into reading. I love reading now, but I fully blame him. Like, I can attribute all of... Right? Like, I remember you could buy those books in the checkout line at the supermarket, and I would get them. Like, my mom would get them for me because I was reading. So I'm not sure I would have been a great reader, honestly. Like, if it hadn't been for those covers, those book covers. And And truly my best memory with my dad's still alive. I'm talking about him like he's dead. But my best memory with my dad was sitting in his study, and he would read his Stephen King books, and I would chill on the couch and read my R.L. Stein. And we didn't talk, but just like being in each other's presence and just sort of knowing like we're reading something naughty or like scary, like was
spooky.
Really, that's like when I think about like my dad, I'm always like that's the coolest bonding we had as when I was a kid. So cool. I fully blame R.L. Stein. I don't think I love horror movies. I don't think I'm as much of a horror head as Danny is. I mean, that's actually a lot of why I wanted to write with him. Was just because I had read stuff that he had written that was far more I don't know what it's on paper horror, and I was like man, this guy really like has a interesting voice when it comes to the genre stuff, and I wanted to just
thank you. Hell yeah.
I just wanted to drain him.
Wow.
I'm curious, how did you two meet? Was it because of Hell House, or how did you guys?
It was Hell House, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
we were motel mates. Like we shared a motel room.
They bunked us together. So like I remember there were a couple things that stood out to me about Gore as an artist. As an actor, then I was like, oh, he's an artist. I remember the first time I actually met him, he was leaving the audition, the callbacks, when I was coming in for the callback. And I remember seeing him and thinking, this guy's got it. He just took my part. Like, look at him. He's got such a unique look.
Too much confidence. I was just like...
Yeah, he was leaving with like a strut and everything.
What an asshole.
And I actually auditioned for his role, but they...
I auditioned for yours.
Yeah, so they switched us, which is fun.
Oh, that's so cool.
But then we were bunkmates, and there was just so many interesting qualities about you, dude. Like, you had this really old luggage from like the 40s or something, and I remember thinking like, what is this old bag? And he was like sitting on it, squeezing his stuff in. I don't know. There was just something about him. I was like, dude, you're fucking cool.
I'm just a mess in retrospect.
He's like, I was like, you want to go over lines? And he was like, nah. He's like, I didn't even read this thing. Like, I was like, you're cool, dude. I was like, you're fucking cool. Because a lot of the movie, I mean, you've seen the movie. The movie's very realistically like natural, like between our performances. Because I think a lot of us treat the script as guidelines, which not to denounce the writers of the script at all, but like it's found footage, you know, it's not performance.
Oh, exactly, though. Like the scripts for found footage, I feel like you have to have some degree of like improv to make it feel like an actual conversation and not like a movie. So absolutely, yeah.
I'm just gonna defend myself really quick because I don't want to. I don't think I'm. Depending on, you know, who you are, that cool or that uncool. Like, I do take my job seriously. But now I'm remembering, though, coming onto that job, I had just finished one of the most interesting film experiences that I ever had, which was shooting in St. George, New York. I did this movie that nobody's seen, and it's somewhere online, but that's it. It's called When the Ice Breaks. And I worked with this two directors. It was Jeremy Leach and Wendy Snyder McNeil, who was an amazing, she's now deceased, but was an amazing photographer and filmmaker. But I did this film with them where it was like 2 weeks and I didn't see a script ever. And they basically told me, they were like, so we're just going to tell you every day. And we shot it chronologically, and they were like, we're just going to tell you every morning what we're going to shoot. And I was like, I have questions. And they wouldn't answer them. And so I just fully had to trust these people. And I did like 2 weeks straight of just like never knowing what the fuck was going on and just sort of like trusting. So I think I was so zenned out from that experience. A lot of it too, like I was in a kayak, like by myself, like, and I didn't know where they were shooting from. They were shooting from weird vantages in the woods. And so I had just finished this experience. And I remember the last night talking to Jeremy, and I was like, I'm going to go do this like found footage movie now. And I remember I was so zenned out from like working with these people. They were really brilliant artists that I think when I showed up for Hell House, I was just like, whatever, man. Like,
he really came in with the coolest aura.
But I'm not like that usually. I mean, it's pretty high anxiety kind of guy.
He's usually very neurotic, yeah.
Yeah. So it's very funny to me to hear Danny talk about me like that, because I'm like, that's not what I'm normally like. But
wild. Wait, what a wild back-to-back
amazing.
situation, like filming situation to go into.
It was awesome.
That's like, I know that it's really cool though as an actor. Like that sounds really cool to like not try, but like you said, try something very different out of your comfort zone in two different ways.
Yeah, it was kind of weird too, because both those movies were like chronological and like improvised. So it was just it was cool. A weird month.
That is a weird but cool month. But
very
so before
cool.
we get into your pick, Gore, I did want to hear from y'all. What was the last movie that truly scared you?
Mine's gonna sound probably annoying to say, but just because it really did affect me. I saw Civil War in theaters.
Yes,
it did scare me.
That was a good pick.
I felt very uneasy. I saw it by myself.
Ooh,
because my wife was like, she's like, I don't know if I'm interested, and I'm like, it's the trailers. They make it look like a different movie. I know it's going to be different than the trailers. So I was like, I'm just gonna go. I'm an AMC Stubs member, Premiere, member. So I was like, it's free. I'm gonna go. And I sat by myself, and I was so affected by it. And I got up, and I wasn't the only one. There were people in the audience. It was the quietest reaction. And I remember this woman was talking to her parents, and she was like, maybe you guys should watch something funny tonight. Like, everybody was so morbid when they left. But I was frightened by it. I've never seen like a war scenario like that in America like that, unless I'm watching like Red Dawn, and even then it's a whole different vibe.
Right.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Horror doesn't really strike me as much, but something realistic like that does.
Yeah, that really got me more than I was expecting. I think I heard all the discourse and I was like, oh Lord, and then I came out of it and I was like, I don't know what other movie people have been watching, because that was fucked up. Like, and I mean that in a good, in like a positive way of like, in terms of anxiety. But Gore, what about you?
Well, I think this isn't normally the kind of movie that would scare me necessarily, but and not to take anything away from the film, but I was a little bit stoned, and I went to a late showing here in France. They love their dubbing, so if I want to see like an American movie in its original language, then it's usually going to be like at night. That's like there's one showing of it, and it'll be like 9-10 o'clock at night. So I gotta like walk out of my house and like go down to the city center and go to the movie. And it was Evil Dead Rises. And it made me I think I was pretty stoned, and I went in alone, and it was just really, it was just a lot. It was just very intense. And I felt just like, at some point I remember being like, I don't know if I can really deal with this. I don't feel good. It felt very dirty, that movie. Like, it felt like I was watching like I really liked though. I liked the take on that franchise, like how they put it in like a small apartment and like got out of the woods, and it was kind of rock and roll. And I don't know. That kind of
I get that. That movie's fucked up. That it was gross and especially like as a parent and a new parent, relatively speaking, I feel like that is even further, because the kids are, sorry guys, spoilers for Evil Dead Rise if you didn't already know, they just kill and kick the shit out of everyone, and there's a lot of lot of kid trauma. So like, it's which is a lot.
I think that's what it was too.
Yeah,
the kid trauma
and
thing.
You're stoned, and you're like, this is like a lot for my brain right now to take in.
I'm very sensitive to kid, child abuse stuff is tough.
I just watched the American one, but I watched the original Speak No Evil. Oh my God, that was the most depressing, like scary, depressing thing I've ever seen. Gore, have you seen the original?
I've seen neither.
Oh my God. From a parental point of view as well, it is just Shudder, absolutely terrifying. Yeah, it's on Shudder. Yeah. You should watch the original. The American one is so American. It's a lot of fun.
It's better. The American one's actually better than I was expecting it to be, though. Like, it's so different. But I had a blast, because James McAvoy is just like a fucking creep the whole time. I love that. Also, talk about douchebag dad characters, though. Scoot McNairy in that movie was the biggest little spineless ass. Anyway.
That's great. I love that actor.
Great. He's great. He's great in it, but I want to punch him in the throat the whole time, which I think was the point. So they did a great job.
Nice.
All right. So We have talked about so many incredible things, but Gore, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
Well, I was between two, but one of them was already. I think you've already discussed in a previous episode. Did I even mention that? No, not necessarily.
Yeah. What was it?
That was The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Which truly, fucked me up. And I just as a funny anecdote, it wasn't the witch, it wasn't the flying monkeys, it was the fucking cowardly lion. Who's
really?
Yeah, he just looked bizarre, and I think it was like the bow in his hair, and the fact that he was like sort of a child in this like big like adult body, it just weirded me the fuck out. Like I didn't know how to deal with my child brain didn't know how to deal with what this. I was like, is he a kid or an adult? Like I don't.
It's sort of uncanny valley, right? Because like you're like kid, adult. Like what is happening here?
Yeah, it was weird. That. And my my older sister, was it my older brother? Sorry, he had a poster on the back of his bedroom door. Which who the fuck does that? But it was it like featured the cast of The Wizard of Oz with that football player Boz. Do you remember him from like the 80s? I don't know. Mm-mm. Clearly all big sports fans here.
What sports?
By Boz Scaggs?
Yeah. Anyways, but apparently I always had to walk by his door like this every day of my life. But that is not what we're here to talk about. I wanted to talk about the film Mommie Dearest, Frank Perry's Mommie Dearest.
So, Mommie Dearest, which I have seen parodied and talked about by so many drag queens and gay men, and have finally watched. In the film, the abusive and traumatic adoptive upbringing of Christina Crawford at the hands of her mother, Screen Queen Joan Crawford, is depicted.
Yes.
Screen Queen, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so take us back, Gore. How old were you when you saw this? How did you see this movie? Kind of give us everything. I want to hear your horror story about this film.
Yeah, well, I think I was about 5 or 6, and I saw this because, and this is like the beauty of growing up when I think we all did, which was that like you could catch things that you weren't supposed to catch on television. Like you could watch things like nowadays we really have to make more of a concerted effort or a choice. But like back then you could just watch something. And if you had older brothers and sisters like I did, who were much older, there was a 10-year gap between me and my older brother, who was the closest in age to me. You would watch a lot of things that they would watch. And so that would, I got introduced to a lot of cool shit, but I also saw some stuff that I was way too young for. And I just didn't give a fuck. And Mommie Dearest is the one that's really ingrained in my brain. I just remember watching it, like, maybe I even wasn't supposed to, I don't know, but I remember sort of like hiding behind a chair and watching this movie unfold, which is essentially just a tale of child abuse at the hands of this. I didn't know anything about Joan Crawford at the time. Now I have a ton of respect for her. But at the time, it just looked like somebody in clown makeup who's like in a mansion and just like beating the shit and like traumatizing her child. And so for me, it was just a very, it was a traumatic experience. And then later on, I grew up doing theater and had like just a host of fantastic directors and teachers, many of which were, brilliant gay men who would quote this movie over and over and over again.
Okay.
And sort of it really became like a part of, like, I don't know. I understood a lot of things through the lens of this film, but initially I understood fear.
So I know we've all seen it. We all watched it for the first time, but Gore, I'm watching this movie and I'm just unpacking what I know of you through this whole movie, and I had so many questions. I was like, oh my god, do you have issues with your mother? Like, is this issues with with you as an actor? I was like, does it have to do with that? Is it just wrong place, wrong time? But also a lot of what is in locations. There's a lot of through points she's so caught up, the mother, she's so caught up in herself that she can't see anything she's doing to the child.
Right.
And she's so, she's blinded by her own I don't know, obsession with herself.
Ambition.
I think there's a lot of Arnold in that.
Yeah. There's the addiction to the...
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, because like you go back and you watch these movies that we saw as a kid, and we're like constantly kind of trying to recreate what scared us.
Yeah, and
I can see, this is scary. I was scared the other night when I watched it for the first time.
Me too. It's terrifying. I think especially okay. Before I get into start talking about it, was there a particular scene, Gore, that really fucked you up, or was it just the entire experience of watching this movie?
Well, not that this is by far the worst part of the movie, but I just remember being very confused by she throws this extravagant birthday party for her daughter, and then I think it was just in her delivery that weirded me out. Not that it's the worst thing to give away presents, but she says something, I don't remember the exact line, but she's like, "Which present would you like to keep?" And it now I can see it through the lens of an adult man, they're giving presents to the needy and stuff. But at the time, as a kid, I just remember being this is very confusing. Because I was obviously seeing it through the little girl's eyes more. And I was just you're getting this big party and you're being celebrated. But then your mom is making up these weird rules. You get to keep one of those, all these gifts. And I think it comes to when you're a kid, most kids don't feel like they have any sense of control of their environment and that they're always being told what to do. And I think it just really weirded me out, the idea that person could be so unhinged, and just looks. I think she was just scary looking to me too as a kid.
She's scary.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's
so interesting because this was my first time watching this, as it is for the majority of people in this podcast. But I was I felt very unmoored watching this movie because I was I don't really know what to hold on to because the movie is structured so incredibly weird that I'm is this a movie about Joan Crawford? Because a lot of it's from her perspective, but then there's the kid, but then she is gone and we're following her mom a lot more. So I'm this whole thing is very unmoored, and there's a lot of horrible things that happen in this, and yet it feels a little over the top in some cases where I was I'm kind of laughing as an adult, but I'm also uncomfortable that I'm laughing that this woman is hitting her kid with a hanger, but at the same time I'm this is kind of camp.
Totally.
And so it's such a weird watch. But the one thing that I will say, and it ties into what you were talking about, Gore, is that as someone that felt like I had to walk on eggshells a lot around my parents, I grew up in the 80s. My dad was definitely that kind of generation of a dad. And so it was this idea that you would walk into a situation and you're not really sure what you're going to experience is I think this movie captures that feeling very well. And if you're a kid watching that particularly, I think this would have been traumatizing for me if I ever watched it as a kid, because I'm oh my God, it's not to this degree, but this is sort of a similar feeling of I don't know how I'm supposed to act around my parents, and there's rules, but then they change in a moment's notice. It's just that I think that is one thing that this, particularly in the early part of this movie captures very well.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Sorry. Why do we keep doing this to each other? No, Danny, it's all you.
Me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's you.
Well, I was gonna say it's also because when I was a kid, a few things that stuck out to me are the abandonment themes. So Fox and the Hound when I was a kid, and she abandons the fox in the woods. That was a big thing for me. That was a big crying child thing for me. And you watch this movie, and this mother figure is she's abandoning her daughter every single scene. There's an emotional abandonment every single time, and you see it. And as an adult, you're like, oh, this girl's crying out, this girl needs help, and every single chance this mother gets, she's like, no, fuck her. Right. She's got to grow up tough. And it's almost kind of like a monster movie in a way, because she's not really the mother. I mean, and how did she get this kid? Because the adoption agency wouldn't. But the adoption agency was like, no way, not you.
Her boyfriend. Her boyfriend pulled
uncle?
A bunch of strings and found her orphans.
I think he's the father
very weird.
too, right?
Yeah, at one point they call him a father, but he's mostly an uncle.
Because I think that they both had to be on they both
forms.
Had to, agree to to parent the kid, but he just sort of did it and was like, peace, good luck, and brings her gifts and shit. Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Go ahead. I'm done.
Fuck me. Just keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna go back on the idea that it really does feel like a monster movie to me, because I mean they kill the monster by the end, and she survives. The daughter survives. Just thought that was really interesting.
Well, it is interesting, like the perspective in this, because it's like it's both like it feels like a biopic, but then also like a damnation of Joan Crawford. So it's like
Totally.
a very, I think it's like having a hard time figuring out what it wants to be, which. But like which is interesting because I feel like because I know that Christina Crawford wrote a biography and this is based on that biography. Yeah, and this is based on that biography that she wrote about being Joan Crawford's daughter. And watching it was rough because like I don't know, like my brothers and I. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening to this, but like we were made to like sit at the table if we didn't finish our dinner, and there were some things that happened in this movie that I was like. Oh, that wasn't normal to happen to you as a kid? Like, you're like, uh-oh. Not that, like, sorry, Mom, like, not that, like, it was abusive, but my mom and my stepdad, like, had ups and downs emotionally. Yeah. So watching this movie now as an adult, I'm like, oh, this is rough. And then it's also rough to be in her perspective. And it's like, are we supposed to sympathize with her? Because I'm having a really hard time sympathizing with her, even though I know she's just, like, wants to be famous so bad and to be a mom at the same time, and she can't hold both. But it's just like a very interesting, like, am I supposed to sympathize with her or hate her or both? And it's interesting to try to hold those two things watching this movie because she's like abusing the kids. Like, you don't want to empathize with a child abuser, but then they make her sympathetic sometimes. So it's a weird balance is going on in this movie.
I don't remember if it's established in the film or not, but just knowing a little bit about Joan Crawford, I know that she like had a pretty like tumultuous child upbringing too, and like and was definitely the product of abuse and like not just growing up, but also by like an industry that like, as you know, like just chews you up and spits you out and like does what they want with you. And I think that she especially came of a time in Hollywood where like that was very, very much the case. But I do think it's so interesting too, like how Faye Dunaway, who's one of my favorite actors of all time, like and how like her career kind of paralleled like Joan Crawford in a bit, and she was really going for it with this movie. I mean, she had already won the Oscar for Network, and then she had done like a slew of like kind of more crowd friendly sort of like action-y kind of movies and stuff, and she was really trying to like get that back, and it kind of killed her career. Not that she didn't go on and do more things, but like it really fucked her up. And I think that it's such an unhinged performance, but I think it's like operatic on the level of like Pacino and Scarface or Nicholson in The Shining, or you know, like something like that.
Nicolas
It's
Cage
really
and anything.
go for broke. Yeah.
What is going on?
I don't know. We're seeing an opening and we're like, let's take it.
I know. I think we're just sharing a brain cell today, which is funny.
Well, I was gonna say, like you said, it didn't do well for her career. She thought she was gonna win an Oscar for it, and apparently, I was reading some trivia. Apparently, the author, the daughter, she said that the actress went way over. That her mother deserved better. That wasn't her mother. And then what's her name? The actress who played her mother. She apparently thinks she's haunted by the ghost of Joan Crawford. Yeah, Faye Dunaway has said it's been said to other people that she thinks she's haunted by Joan Crawford because I think she did her so poorly. Because I mean, she chews up every single line of dialogue in that movie. It is incredible. But I think operatic is a good word.
There was one review that I found of this talking about her performance, and it was sort of like that she doesn't where was it? It was something to the fact where like she doesn't just chew scenery, she like devours it and all the cast in the same scene. Like
amazing. I think John Waters said it's the first, I'm gonna fuck this up. I can't misquote John Waters, but I think it was something to the effect of it's the first drag performance by a woman.
That's fair.
Honestly, it really is, because even at the beginning, like the opening sequence is her putting on like the eyebrow, like the iconic eyebrows and the lip line, like the lips and everything. Like it really is like watching a drag queen get ready to perform, and like every outfit is an outfit, and it just is like my favorite moment, because it's so ridiculous, is when she's like holding the plate of cold dinner and she's wearing this like disco ball-esque dress, and then there's just this shot of this epic staircase and her standing at the top holding this plate of steak and going down the stairs with a train, and I'm just like, what is this movie? But I'm obsessed with it. Like, it's so tonally ridiculous that it is fully like the Susan Sontag camp definition of like not trying to be camp at all, so it becomes camp.
Yeah.
And but I also understand that it's like trying to show like a diva, basically like a diva trying to balance being a diva and also being a parent, and how it is like absolutely impossible. This movie got so much shit when it was released, but watching it now, I can see why it got a lot of shit, but I can also deeply appreciate it for what it is. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the Joan Crawford. She can't turn off. She can't turn it off. She can't not be dramatic. Like, there was a scene in the movie where she yells at father, and he's like, what are you, crazy or what? And she's like, I'm crazy. And then he throws her down. And she's looking at him, and she's doing this whole performance, and he goes, get up. There's no cameras in here. And I was like, wow, so she's performing in her personal life, and they're calling that out. Like, even to the point.
Out again. She goes, the daughter goes, don't act for me.
Yeah. It's a really like good peek into the horrors of what it can be to grow up as an actor, to grow up, especially if you're a child actor who grows up into it and you just can't turn it off.
You know, as a gay man, I've never seen this movie, but I know everyone would quote it at me, like in gay spaces, drag queens, like this, between Joan Crawford and Faye Dunaway's performance as Joan Crawford, like this is given material for the queer community for many years. And so before watching this movie, I knew about like, the wire hangers and I knew about like the bring me the axe, because like people would just randomly shout this in queer spaces. And so like when I finally saw the scene, I really thought like everyone's like, she chops a tree down. I thought she like was out there chopping down a fucking huge tree. And it's so funny because in my mind I'd built this up, and it is like this small like little fruit tree that is in her backyard, and she is like whacking at it as if like one fell could knock it over, and of course it is slowly being chopped down. And I just started laughing because I was like, this was the scene that people keep saying, bring me the axe, it's for this. I love that. It's so funny watching this with so many years of it being parodied, and seeing like the importance of Joan Crawford and Faye Dunaway to the queer community, and then finally watching it and being like, this movie is wild.
Can I ask a question? Do you think, I don't know, just like revisit, I watched it again this last year. I showed my wife, and then I just was kind of reviewing it this week. Do you think, like the scene like that some of that is not a little tongue-in-cheek by the director? Like, I mean, they acted like, oh my God, we had no idea that this was going to be such a campy movie. But like, if you look at like Joan Crawford's old films, like, there's so much so many camp elements to it, and to this performance, and like, you don't think that some of that is like winking at all? Like, some of it's like, it seems impossible to me that they couldn't have been a little aware of what they were doing.
To me, I think they were trying, but I think the problem is there's not a good delineation, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there are these moments where they are trying to be tongue-in-cheek, but I think because Faye Dunaway's performance is so unhinged, I think it's kind of hard to distinguish maybe like when they're being, I don't know how they would do that, but I feel like in this movie and how it's executed, I think it's harder to see it to me as just only seeing it once, just like recently. I don't know.
I think I just thought of this comparison. It's going to sound weird at first, but I kind of feel like you can compare it to the idea of like The Sopranos, okay? You watch The Sopranos and you've got characters like Tony, Paulie, and they are genuine. They are who they are. and they're not being funny, but the show is absolutely hilarious. And because the show is about this type of person that doesn't exist anymore because the world around them won't let them exist anymore. And I feel like Joan Crawford is one of those people in this world where she grew up being this dramatic person and the world changed around her. And that's part of the movie too. They're like, you're not billable anymore. Your movies are failing. And so she's constantly living in this world where she's like, I am this dramatic person. Everybody loves me. And the world is saying, no, we don't. You're a joke now. You're coming off way too crazy. And you go and you watch Sopranos and you've got, Paulie saying some ridiculous things. And this guy is so genuine because that's his world. That's who he is. And yet it's a comedy, because the whole point of Sopranos is the mafia can't exist in a modern world. And I don't think that old Hollywood starlets could exist anymore at this point. And I think that was kind of the idea.
Interesting.
I kind of think the response to this, because I was looking through critical responses of the time, and it kind of ties into what you were saying, Danny, where it's like I started thinking as you were talking, comparing to Sopranos, I was like, it also reminds me a little bit recently of May December, because some people find that movie very funny. Some people find that movie not funny at all. Right. And as I was looking through the critical responses, I mean, you have Roger Ebert, who gave it a 1 star and says, I can't imagine who would want to subject themselves to this movie, calling it unremittingly depressing. Not to any purpose of drama or entertainment, but just to depress. It left me feeling creepy. And then you have Variety saying the quote that I had found originally: Dunaway does not choose scenery. Dunaway starts neatly at each corner of the set in every scene and swallows it whole, co-stars and all. And then you have awesome. You have Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times saying that Faye Dunaway is terrific as Joan Crawford, but the film plays like a limp parody of a bad Crawford movie. So like we have these people that are picking up on maybe some of the camp aspects of it, and then people that are like, this woman is beating her kid with a wire hanger. This is not entertainment. And so like it's weird to me that this movie fits in those things where you could read it as pure camp and you could read it as like, this is absolutely horrifying. And I think that might be why Paramount had problems marketing it too, because at one point, I guess they realized that audiences were responding to it as if it was an unintentional comedy, and so then they started to advertise to lean into the camp status of it. Like, meet the biggest mother of them all is a quote attributed to it. So like all of a sudden they started changing their tone to like make it lean into the more camp stuff. So it's just, I don't think no one knew what to do with this movie.
It's difficult.
I think I saw something, read something that people were coming to the cinema with wire hangers or something like that. Became like that too. That became like instantly iconic to that film.
I mean, it's what I know about this film. Like before, going into this and the acts, like those are the big things I remember hearing all the time, particularly the wire hangers. And for the longest time, I'll be honest, I thought, this is going to sound horrible, but I thought the wire hangers were about like abortion. Like I thought that's what was happening.
I was also expecting abortion
for the longest time. I didn't know that she was like beating her kid with them. I was like, what am I going to be watching in this movie was my initial thought walking into it. Because like I'd heard the wire hangers and I just associated that with
that's
abortion.
Hilarious.
Like
I also expected more at the end too. I guess because I'm a modern movie watcher. Like if they remade this movie, I feel like somebody would die. Like there would be a murder or something. If they made this movie today, the sensationalism of it would get the better of them, and somebody would eventually get. I was expecting the daughter to like, I've had enough. I don't know where I was expecting this movie to go.
But I think, as Terry said earlier, it's like the structure is so strange to the movie. It's almost just vignettes of abuse. Like just like little vignette, which I think is I don't know. I'm kind of a fan of those kind of films when they're just sort of like little moments and that depict a life or whatever, or a piece of a life. But it's really just vignettes. Like it's sort of like it's not that connected. I mean, what's the through line of the film? I guess just the daughter growing up.
Passage of time. Yeah, I feel like it's literally just like the daughter growing up and then Joan Crawford's career. It's like the daughter growing up and how Crawford's career changed with the daughter growing up, and just like since it's based on her biography, it just is like kind of like stories from her life. And someone, I think it was on Letterboxd or somewhere, described it as just like a kid's chapter book where you only have like a couple pages in the chapter and you don't get a lot of context. But but to me, I think I would rather have this. I think the format works though, in that if the goal is to show like how crazy Crawford was like as a mother, I think this is a very effective job of like showing those moments. Because if the goal is just to show that, and show these, like, how parentified and how this kid was not given a childhood. I think this definitely does that very well. Like,
well,
she pours, like, literally, like, lets someone in and pours them a scotch and, like, fixes him a drink. And she's like,
okay, gives him
like,
a fucking huge scotch. That guy is not leaving that place anywhere sober. Like,
we call
that
that
was a lot of scotch.
Growing up in my house, we call that a Michelle pour. Sorry, Mom. But to this day, we still call that a Michelle pour.
That's funny.
Hilarious.
One thing in the movie that doesn't really, no one ever really goes further in, it's maybe twice on screen, but that little boy is strapped into his bed.
Okay.
What the fuck was that? That was wild. Like, why does he have that on him?
And then he just vanishes for most of the movie until the very end when he comes for the funeral. And I'm like, what happened to Christopher?
I think
it's not his story.
I mean, besides, like, how fucked up she is, I mean, she's blitzed the whole movie, too.
Sure.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
So
wasn't everybody back then?
She's making these decisions, but what is she, it's like she's drinking and it's like pills, right? So
I don't remember pills.
Who knows?
Are they pills?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that maybe I just know
everyone
that
was on
about
pills. I feel like everyone was just on pills then.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joan Crawford.
Must have been awesome.
It's nothing against you.
My favorite scene though, my favorite line was the little girl's crying in bed, and the nanny or whatever comes over, and she's also crying, and she's like, "They're making your mother do a screen test. Do you know what that is?" I was like, wow, it's the most dramatic thing in the world that she has to do a screen test. Like, it's hilarious. That's so funny.
Oh, it's so funny.
Come on.
It's like so funny and so sad. It's so sad though. Like, it's just so depressing because you're like, this poor fucking kid is just under the tyranny of a aging starlet, and she's so fucked up. And it's so sad. It's like, when I was, this movie just made me really sad. I was just like, this is so deeply upsetting. And like,
I was laughing the entire time.
I know, which is hard. It's hard not to laugh, but then also you think about it and you're just like, fuck. Anyway.
Yeah. Because we really all are, whether we have good parents or bad parents, that we are at their whimsy. We have to, you know, whoever's raising us in whatever context, you know, like we're.
But like, to that point, like, there's so often, it feels like, especially on like social media nowadays, you see people having kids and treating them like dolls for like TikTok, and it feels like accessories. And and I think this is an early example. Like, she says, I've always wanted kids, but like, why did you want kids? And then she just gets to have two of them, like procured for her, and then she just like treats them as her own little puppets. Like, she trains them how to talk on camera and how to pose for the camera, and it's just one of those things where it's like, kids really don't have any autonomy, and like these poor kids are just like forced into these habits, and it's just like so tragic, I guess, just to see like what she inflicted upon these kids. And again, there was accusations of it not, maybe parts of it being drawn like not true, and I guess we'll never like fully know like what was true, what was not, or maybe it is all true, but still, like, regardless, it's just kind of
Yeah, so I know Christina Crawford had no involvement in the making of the film and calls it grotesque and a work of fiction. She's kind of interesting because there was like, she says that it was not a very good movie. She called it grotesque. She said it's highly inaccurate, that her mother never chopped down a tree with an axe or beat her with a wire hanger. So there's that. But then at the same time, her book like did a split between her and her other siblings, because unlike the movie doesn't talk about it, but she did have Joan Crawford did adopt two kids. I think they were twins like years ago before getting Christina and Christopher. And that's not in the movie at all. And but apparently Kathy Crawford, one of the older siblings, sued Christina for defamation in the 90s. And there's a whole, like, the story behind this is also just very wild, and it comes down to like a she said, but one of the she's is no longer with us. So it's like, what what really happened here, and I think that is maybe one of my problems I had with the movie, is that I wanted to know more about. I think you, Danny, were talking about how this is like a monster movie, and I kept thinking it, as you were saying that, it is, because like in a monster movie, we don't really get to see a lot of the motivation behind the monster.
Right.
Or what made the monster the monster. They're just the monster. Mm-hmm. Like maybe there's a brief throwaway line of Freddy Krueger, being, burned because he was a child murderer, and that's all we get. Whereas here, it's like we get some hints about her childhood or her history in the past, but
barely, yeah.
It doesn't really ever interrogate that. So it kind of, I don't know, it feels very like, okay, she's a monster, but I wanted to know why, because she's a real human being. And the film doesn't ever want to kind of interrogate that at all.
Well, it took what it needed to make a movie. I mean, it's like like Stephen King's issues with The Shining. He's like, I wrote a very in-depth analysis of how divorce affects a child and how, parental abuse. And then Kubrick was just like, they're in a maze and he's going to kill him. And like, I love The Shining. I think it's one of the best horror movies ever made, but it's not the book at all. And it's because it only took a few things that it needed. Because when you make a movie, you're like, I just need these elements. Like, I don't have time or the patience to unpack it all. And this movie is exactly that. And this movie was like, I don't need anything else. I just have this idea, and it's going to translate. And, she's going to chop down a tree because I told her to, So, yeah, they just took small elements and blew it into this. I can't imagine how different the true story is.
Yeah. I've never read the book or anything. It's weird now though, because Christina apparently for a while was showing up to showings of this movie to kind of hawk her book a bit. So it's like, I don't know. It's just the whole situation behind it is so kind of
good
weird.
For you, girl. Slay.
Yeah. Get that money, man. Get that money.
Get your bag. Get your bag.
All the money. No.
That's not true. Get the real story here. You know what?
Yeah.
I got it. Is there anything else we want to hit on before we give this our rating and wrap up? I feel like we talk about this movie forever, but
yeah. What was your guys' favorite quote from the movie?
Oh my gosh, I wrote so many down. The way she would say, she says, "Clean up this mess." The way she would enunciate the mess at one point, or Christina as a little kid going, Jesus Christ.
That's the best.
Yeah, that is the best. Yeah.
Because the actress that plays her looks simultaneously like an old woman stuck in a kid's body and a very young kid.
Yeah,
and she just
so
like
good. I love
she is
her.
really good, but
she's so good.
She is really good, but she looks so much older than her body is, and so when she's like. Jesus Christ. I just about died laughing. I think that was my favorite line.
That's good.
I think Bring Me the Axe was pretty incredible. And then there's a part at the beginning when she's cleaning and she's like, did you move the pot, Helga? And when she makes her move, then she's like, I'm not mad at you, Helga. I'm mad at the dirt. And it was just like...
The dirt. We didn't touch on that at all, by the way. The OCD.
Oh my God. The OCD. Oh, yeah. I was just
the middle of the night cleaning. Oh.
That was...
This woman was tortured, it seems like.
Yeah,
at least
she was just not well. She was so... And, you can't blame her, but then also... They make her seem insane.
I heard a story, I think it was about Chuck Berry. Was it Chuck Berry? Yeah, Chuck Berry. Somebody stayed at his house. It was like a mansion, and it was later on, his life. And they just would hear the vacuum cleaner go off at 2 a.m. And they would go out into the hall, and Chuck Berry would just be vacuuming the whole house every night. And they'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he'd go, "It's got to get done."
Yeah, it's so funny because I have a very vivid memory of staying over at one of my friends' house when I was a kid, having sleepover, and his mom would be 2 a.m. We'd be downstairs in the basement, and she'd be upstairs vacuuming, and then she would come downstairs while we were playing games, and she would make us move our feet and vacuum underneath us while we were playing games at night. Yeah, so that memory unlocked right there.
Wow.
Ooh, interesting.
That's tough. How's she doing now?
Don't know.
Was she just really busy all day?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was every weekend that I was over there. She was doing that at 2 a.m.
How did your friends refer to their mom? Did they call her?
He was
Mommie Dearest?
needs to get done. I wish. No, he just like has to get done is basically what he said too, to that degree.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is happening?
Well, I had a couple favorite scenes I already brought up. I really liked when she was like, "Your mom has to get a screen test." I thought that was really funny. But I thought there were a lot of good lines that kind of encapsulated kind of the idea. Like, I thought there was a line that they would throw at her whenever she was kind of going off, and one of them was the guy was like, she was drinking. Because a lot of it, she's got substance abuse, and he was like, when you were a kid, it made you look sexy. Now it just makes you look drunk. And I was like, damn, that's damning. Like that's
awful.
It was so awful. But it's kind of like the idea of the whole thing. Like when you were a kid, you could everything was, this is what you were made for. I get like we built you into this actress when you were a kid, and now you're aging out of it, and you're not a starlet. You're just a drunk, abusive mother. And I think that's kind of the emotional, resonance right there. Is it all comes down to that. That's why it's hard. You do feel for her a little bit. It's hard, but it's there.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, she clearly had a rough go, and maybe she was doing her best. She was just trying to get those kids toughened up.
Make sure they don't escape at night from their bed.
Yeah.
That is one detail that I'm like, what was happening here?
Yeah, they don't explain it, do they?
No.
That's how you know it's a horror film.
Just like make it hear like even crazier. Like she just like chained her kids to the bed. Whatever. All right. Do we want to wrap up and give this our rating out of 5?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right, Terry, you're up first. How many wire hangers out of 5 do you give Mommie Dearest?
This is such a hard one because like I think the movie is way too long. I kind of wish it stuck with like the young portion of it, because I feel like the pacing kind of stops once we get to just basically sending her to different schools and then the wrap up. I get why we're doing it, but I was also like really confused because if this is about Joan Crawford, it's not really tying into Joan Crawford a whole lot. Like we're not getting a whole because it feels like we're hitting all the big parts, marrying the Pepsi CEO, all this kind of stuff, but it just, which you would see in some biopics, but like I don't know. It loses something for me in this back half. The first half I found to be very horrifying, but also funny at the same time. As I've been trying to kind of explore throughout this conversation, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how to rate this one. I really don't. Part of it's like this is 5, and part of it is like this is a 1. So I don't know how to answer that. I don't know how to answer that move at all. What about you, Mary Beth?
So I'm gonna just like I'm gonna do like a median and do 3.5. I'm gonna push it to 3.5 because I really liked it. Like I definitely understand why people like criticisms, but like I don't know. I think it's a really if it outside of it being like a real based on reality, it's just like a really weird good look at a fucked up starlet just doing her best, and her best is really bad. And like it's kind of a realistic portrayal of child abuse, and it seems like insane in a monster movie, but also like nothing that she does is really like, if you think about it, the Rose Garden part's pretty crazy. But, like, the other stuff is, like, I don't know. I've had friends whose parents have done shit like that. So it's, like, I don't know. I think there's something campy and realistic about it that is very intriguing to me. And I definitely want to watch it again to, like, think about it more.
I definitely want to watch it again, too.
There's something really cool happening here and really bizarre. And I don't know. And I'm glad I finally watched it. So thank you, Gore, for getting us to watch this weird, interesting movie. So y'all, Gore and Danny, you have the final word. How many wire hangers out of 5 do you give Mommie Dearest?
I'll let Gore finish it off. I'll start. I'm gonna give it honestly, I guess a 4. I mean, our wire hangers are good, right? I agree.
In this context, yes. In this context, yes.
Okay. I agree with Terry. I think it fell off at the end. I would have liked, knowing they took as many liberties as they already did with the true story, I would have liked them to have taken more liberties and really given us this ending. But at the same time, I think that's kind of the message, is like it's not like as much as crazy as they went with it, it's still like realistic. Like they just grew up and she died, and that was kind of it. I mean, she did take her part on the soap opera, which I thought was hilarious.
That is such a weird anecdote, too.
Yeah, that's really funny that she was like, I'll take my daughter's role.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. I did really enjoy it. I didn't know where it was going to go. I was frightened by the characters, and I did really care for the kids. So on that, I think it's a 4 if it's out of 5, because I think it did what it wanted to do for me as a viewer.
Oh yeah.
It's tough because I think that it like it's a movie of its time. It's from the 80s, but it's also representing sort of like this 1950s sort of searing Douglas Sirk melodrama. It's very like, candy colored, and so like I love that. But then it's also, I don't know, it's got sort of such like violent elements without being super overtly violent in some ways. So I guess if I'm being fair, I'm going to say a 4, but because it obviously had such an effect on me as a kid, I mean, I got to give it the top prize, right? Like,
hell yeah.
You asked me what movie fucked me up the most as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that was that and The Wizard of Oz, which is arguably one of the greatest movies of all time. So I gotta go for 5 wire hangers.
I do think what I did find interesting, because Frank Perry directed this, and he was known for his character studies, and he had been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Director for his independent film David and Lisa. So like, I think people were expecting maybe that kind of level coming into this, but it doesn't seem like we're getting that kind of character piece that he might be known for. Having not seen his filmography, I don't know. I'm just basing it off of what I've read, but it's what a wild time. But thank you both so much for joining us to talk about Mommie Dearest and finally getting me to watch it. Are either of you online? Are you on social media? If so, where can our listeners find you? And the floor is yours to plug away. Does Locations have a planned release, or what's the idea behind it other than being a concept film?
Or
concept for a large film?
So we're both on social media. Gore, relatively new to social media.
Like 3 weeks.
Yeah. So you can find him.
Welcome to the future.
Yeah.
You could find me. You could probably just search my name, Danny Bellini, or I have a screen name I've been using since AIM. It's called Hypo50. Locations is, like we said, it's a proof of concept short film. We're going to submit it to some film festivals. I'm not sure how it's going to perform because it is a proof of concept, and I think people know that when they watch it. So we're still trying to figure out where it's going to go, but the goal is to make a feature film. So if anyone's interested in seeing a feature-length version of what we made, which will obviously have more in it, then please tell us. Let us know. Follow us. There's a page for Locations Movie. There's a website, locationsmovie.com. And we're going to be basically trying to generate buzz and excitement for this up until next year in our search for investments to make this, because the whole point of the proof concept was to see if we could, and we can. So we're going to do it again. So yeah, that's the plug on that one.
Yeah,
cool. And we'll put all of that in the show notes, including the website. So
yeah,
that'll all be out there, listeners.
Great, cool. Awesome, and go see Substance.
Yeah, just because it's great. Yeah, it's fun.
Rocks. And then watch Hell House. Support these guys. And if you guys are going to some screening. Are there screenings you guys are going to be?
Yeah, they're playing Hell House in theaters for the first time at Alamo Draft House in Brooklyn next week. And I got tickets just because I've never seen it in a theater. Everybody at my job was like, "Did you know this was happening?" I had no idea it was happening. So I got tickets. I got Jared Hacker to get a ticket. Lauren Kennedy got a ticket. Unfortunately, Joe Bandelli and Stephen Cognetti are busy, but they're going to be doing a little Q&A with us after the movie. So it'll be the three of us, me, Jared Hacker, and Lauren Kennedy, after the movie to answer some questions. Alamo Draft House is amazing cinema. They've got a great style and good food, even though I don't think you should be eating chicken wings during a movie. But it's a great theater. I sat next to a guy licking his fingers eating chicken wings during Mission Impossible, and I was like, bro, this mission is very possible, right? Like, you're making it. It's impossible I'm going to leave. But I do love Alamo Draft House. I love their style and their aesthetic.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it's sold out. But I guess if there's time, if anybody wants to try and go. But yeah, so watch Hell House. I loved the fourth one they just came out with, and I'm pretty sure they're making a fifth one.
Yeah, the last fourth one was really good too. I really liked that one. I was like brought it back to kind of the feel of the first film.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was cool.
All right, listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with Mommie Dearest? Honestly, I'm so curious. So please tell us. You can let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com. Or you can let us know on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at mbmcandrews and on Instagram at mb.mcandrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful everywhere.
And of course, follow the podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky at Scarred Podcast and on Instagram at Scarred for Life Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.